Everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into the page. I'm here with Noah from Personal Finance PT. Noah, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background.
Yeah. So I have been a clinician now for 1 year full time. I graduated in May of 2024 with my DPT. But I basically started off doing community college. I did that for 2 years. And then after I graduated community college, I went to undergrad at Rutgers University. That's my alma mater in New Jersey. And then I graduated from there and went to New York Medical College for my DPT. Um, and since I'm here, I'm talking about finances and stuff. I'll give you a little insight into mine in terms of where I personally was on my journey. I did community college and undergrad at a very close undergrad university. So I actually was able to get out of undergrad pretty much debt free. And then PT school came, and that's where all my debt came from.
Yeah.
So, and like, we'll talk about this as we go through the conversation, but like, I wish I knew a lot more about finances. And I'm glad that I did what I did because it really saved me a lot of mental headache by getting out of undergrad debt free. But if you know what I know, if you were to know, if I was to know what I knew now, I would have done a lot of things differently when going into PT school. But even me, just my oblivious self, just getting through undergrad and saying, "Oh, I've got no debt. That's awesome." Like, it really helped me out for where I'm at now. But I still have a good amount of debt. I'm over 6 figures in debt from PT school. So it's a burden, but I figured out to have a plan to maximize that. So um, that's kind of what I do. I live in New York. I live up about an hour north of the city in the Rockland County, Westchester County area, and I moved up here because it was close to where my job opportunities were, and also my now wife lives here. So I moved
Yeah.
up from New Jersey to live up here. And a little crazy thing was like when I graduated school and I moved to New York and everything for PT school. I finished PT school, got engaged the year before, took the MPTE,
Yeah.
and then got married 2 days after I got my results.
Oh,
So
wow. That
it
is
was
quite a,
like,
yeah.
yeah, it was either about to be the best wedding ever or like
Right.
still the best wedding ever, but just in the back of my mind, like, oh my gosh, I failed. But
Yeah.
luckily I passed.
That's
So I
good.
was able to then go and enjoy my honeymoon without like the stress of, oh shoot, I have to study again. So
Yeah.
that was like a big
Awesome.
risk, but it paid
Yeah.
off. Um,
That's awesome.
so that worked out great. That was a crazy year, 2024, but now I'm a year clinician for 1 year. And
Yeah.
then one more fun fact about me is that I'm a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan, so go Birds.
Okay.
Are
Yeah.
you a football fan?
No, but I could say go birds too. I think after go birds.
After
But
what? They won the Super Bowl?
yeah.
So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned too, like your experience in undergrad to now. If you were to go back to yourself in undergrad with all of the wisdom you have now, what would you tell to students starting? Because a lot of students start programs pretty soon, actually. What would you tell them about loans, personal finances, things that you wish you knew?
So my big thing would be to begin with the end in mind. So as you go, it's hard as a student when you get into undergrad. A lot of the times you have questions about what you want to do, where you want to go, what your endpoint is going to be. But at least beginning with at least some sort of an endpoint in mind, at least financially, is something that I wish I had done. When going, like I said earlier, I was lucky in that I had no idea what I was doing other than, "Oh, I'm just going to try and be as cheap as possible and go to a cheap school." And it worked out great because I figured out I wanted to be a PT. So that worked out nicely considering how much debt I ended up taking on.
Yeah.
But if I was going back to my undergrad self, it would be to begin with the end in mind when it came to everything, including finances. So have a plan, have a budget, make sure that you know, okay, here's what my income is going to be, what it's projected to be, because that's something that I didn't know going into PT school was how much PTs actually make regarding how much their debt to income ratio is typically.
Yeah.
So when you pick a career, like part of the decision should be, okay, how much money am I going to make and how much debt am I going to take on? Because
Right.
that's gonna be a big burden for a lot of people, and it can stress a lot of people out for sure. And so when I found out that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to take on 6 figures of debt, and then people come out of school getting offered 75K for an outpatient job, I'm like, what
Yeah.
is going on here?
Yeah.
So, and I was already in too deep. Like I was not getting out of being a PT, and I don't think I would have either way. I
Yeah.
think I would have been a PT regardless. I'm super passionate about the field,
Yeah.
but
I
begin
love
with the end in mind.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned too that the expectations were important and it's important to like had that passion, but a lot of the reason people are burned out today is because of the finances. So I love that you mentioned having the end goal in mind and having a plan for how you're going to navigate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's probably one of the most important things that you can do to set yourself up for success. I know people who do that and they come out of grad school with minimal to no debt and they're chugging along. It's
Yeah,
not to say that you can't do well if you have student debt, but it just sets you up for a lot less stress and a lot of an easier time getting out of school and going into, life.
right. Right. And you had mentioned earlier too, like budgeting as a student. I know that we kind of go through like PT school, like with the broke student mindset, but
Hmm.
I think it's very common, the 50/30/20 rule. Do you have like any insight on that or any like alternatives to that or any advice?
Yeah. Yeah, so just a quick rundown on the 50/30/20 rule, right? So 50% of your budget goes towards your needs, 30% goes towards your wants, and 20% goes towards your future. That's typically how the 50/30/20 rule works. If I was a student and going through this process again, I would kind of throw it out the window, to be honest. I would. So here's the thing: a lot of what's kind of also like for some people it works and some people it doesn't. If you can get a job while you're in PT school or have some sort of alternative income asset, like I wish I had built a personal brand while I was in school. I wish I had taken advantage of social media and built a following. Like I see a lot of students out there now who are putting themselves out there on Instagram and I'm like following some of them and I'm like, this is so cool. Like I wish I had done that in school to at least build some kind of a name for myself in socials because the world is changing and we got to change along with it. Our professors didn't do that, so it's up to us to do that. And
Right.
Instagram and social media, TikTok, all this stuff, like it's so like it's crazy how many people you can reach.
Yeah.
And you can set up for yourself a pretty nice stream of income, especially if you do like coaching on the side or if you do like personal training or something like that related to your field if you're passionate about it. But or even just doing something like Ubering or doing Uber Eats like on the side after studying, right? Like
Right.
having some other source of income to cover as much of your needs as possible is going to be like super beneficial so that you can reduce your student loan burden. So
Right.
the reason I'm saying throw out the 50/30/20 rule is not to actually like throw it out, but focus on like the first priority is like not to save and invest because you're about to take on a bunch of student debt. So you need to figure out how to reduce that student debt burden. And if you can have a job that takes care of some of that for you, I would throw what you can from your job at your needs, which includes everything from your tuition to your room and board to your textbooks, any of that stuff that you would need to cover for your PT school finances.
Yeah.
Um, Anything to reduce that student loan burden. Now, there is the balance of wants, right? So obviously in PT school, you're going to want to live a little. You're going to go want to go out with your friends. You're going to want to go and do stuff. I did a crazy thing. In 2022, I took me and my buddies, we went to Cancun to an
Oh, wow.
all-inclusive resort.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was all paid for using student loan money.
Yeah.
So don't tell the IRS I said that. But anyway, it was a decision that we made. And like,
Yeah.
gosh, that memory was like, even though maybe financially not the best decision, like those memories, I have those forever.
Right.
Like that was an incredible experience. So obviously that's kind of like a pretty extreme example and kind of expensive.
Yeah.
But we did that and it was something I will never regret.
Yeah.
So in general, as a student, like you're gonna want to live a little. You're gonna want to go out and do things with your friends outside of studying and stuff like that. The people that you meet in school. We're not gonna, you don't totally live like a hermit.
Right.
And if you do want to do that, that's totally fine. Like
Yeah.
you'll probably come out with better financially ahead. But like you also have to realize that there is a balance in life. When you're a student, you definitely want to take some time off of studying and go enjoy with your friends. And sometimes that involves spending money.
Yeah.
Um, you just have to realize that the dollars that you spend when you think about how much you want to spend on the things that you want, they do have an opportunity cost associated with them, right? So every dollar you spend that could be put towards reducing your student loan burden that builds interest over time, right? You're going to be end up paying for that back to the government. So it's just something to think about in the back of your head when you're kind of budgeting out what you want to do outside of your needs. So I would definitely encourage students who are in PT school to definitely live, like go do things because you're going to be really stressed. You're going to be studying a lot and you're going to want to go out and do stuff. And I would never tell somebody, yeah, you need to stay up, cooped up in your dorms and not spend any money because your student loans are going to be higher. Like that's just being a miser of life.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you live a little bit. So you just have to think in the back of your mind, okay, how much is this really costing me? Right. And just
Right.
be aware of that.
Yeah.
When it comes to future, right? So the future is at 20%. Um, the student loan interest that you're building up. So when you take out student loans, you are going to be incurring interest on those loans when you are in school. So
Yeah.
if you started saving money towards your future, what I would try to think about is just building some sort of a reserve, like an emergency reserve or a reserve of dollars that you're going to have just in case something comes up like medically or importantly, or some big expense comes up that you didn't know about, like your car breaks down or something like that. You need to have some sort of financial emergency reserve so you can just cover for those costs. Other than that, I wouldn't focus too much on investing if you're taking out student loans because you would just want, I just want you to reduce the student loan burden so that way you're not trying to battle the student loan interest and trying to invest at the same time. It
Yeah.
kind of creates a complicated scenario where when you
Yeah.
could just reduce your student loan burden, like that is the safe way to do it.
Yeah.
Hopefully that all makes sense.
Yeah. No, that was a great answer. And I really love that you mentioned like prioritizing experiences. It sounds like intentionality is like really the
Yeah.
name of the game with that.
Yes. Yeah. Just knowing what you want to do and thinking about, okay, is this really going to be costing me? Like, how much is this really going to cost me in the future in terms of my student loan debt? Just be aware of what that will be and not just spend money willy-nilly.
Right. Like you would be okay with going to like Cancun, but maybe doing like DoorDash for a pizza. Like you can drive to get the pizza instead of, because I always thought of it too, and this helped me, was like, would I want to pay interest on this pizza that I'm door dashing right now?
Right. So here's like one of the things that I wish I told myself when I was younger too was understanding the power of compounding interest that would work in your favor. So the crazy stat that really woke me up was that if you're 20 years old, every dollar that you invest can become $88 by the time you retire. If you're 25 years old, which is like what most kind of PTs come out of school, kind of graduating with, if you're 25, a dollar can still become over $40 by the time you're retired. So like when you think about that, like that bottle of beer that you just bought, like for $8, like you just ended up spending like over 250, $300
Yeah.
when that's what that money could have become.
Yeah.
So like thinking about it that way really opens your mind to like, oh my gosh, like that's how much like that's what these dollars that I don't need to be spending,
Mhm.
like yeah, if I hadn't spent 2,000 bucks on Cancun, like yeah, I would have had a lot more money.
Right.
But like that was something
But
that we did.
like the experience too. And I think at some
Exactly.
point, I love that you mentioned like you don't have to be Scrooge with everything. You can actually enjoy life and still be smart about your finances.
Yeah, there's a way to do it that balances both things without ostracizing your friends or feeling like, you can't do anything because you're trying to focus on not being, bad financially.
Yeah. I love too. I love for like this new generation. I feel a little bit old, but I love this new generation of PT students, like you had mentioned too, building the personal brand and just having another stream of income because it is possible in school. And I've seen it a
Yep.
lot more recently that this new wave of PT students are really maximizing social media. And there's so much flexibility with that too. So I love that for this new generation too.
Yeah, and I think that's something that more students are waking up to now. Because I had a couple of friends in school who were doing that sort of thing, and it
Yeah.
wasn't really gaining a ton of traction at that point. But there were a lot of PTs who were starting to do it, and all the professors were just like,
Yeah.
get some mentorship. You can't do travel. Go get mentored first before you travel because it's gonna be crazy. Or don't open up your own clinic because you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, some of that advice is just so outdated. It's
Yeah.
it's it's crazy how outdated. It's like these professors, we need to get them to wake up so that way we can actually get these students prepared for the world that they're about to enter.
Yeah. And I think too, the work that you're doing too is super important because it is really like sharing what the reality is and that it's not all doom and gloom, that there is some things you can do about it.
Yeah, I mean, you know about Physiogram? They're like one of the biggest pages
Mhm.
on Instagram for
Yeah.
PT. If you look at their comments sections sometimes, it is
Yeah,
a
very
lot of
salty.
complainers. There are
Yeah,
people that just complain about the terrible things about our field. And don't get me wrong, I think every field has like a,
right,
a bad thing about it. If you are in a field, there's always something people will complain about. And for us, it's like debt to income ratio, which is a pretty big thing. Uh,
right,
but like there are a lot of the things that a lot of people are complaining about, they actually have a lot more control over than they think they do.
right,
And instead of being in a victim mindset, my goal is to help people plan to actually be successful in spite of what challenges they face, right?
right. That's awesome. And kind of going into like all these things about the student loan changes. I know that some students are starting school. what's kind of like the SparkNotes version of it for students that are, say, starting to take out loans? Are they going to have to take out private loans, or is it kind of more for the people that graduate in 2026?
Yeah, so I'll kind of categorize this into three categories, right? So let's just say you passed the MPTE like yesterday and you're done with school and you're about to go out into the field. You pretty much have access to anything that you and I have access to in terms of what you can do with your student loans. So you still have access to the old income-based repayment, which is basically your monthly payment is it's 10% of your discretionary income. And all that is, it's your adjusted gross income, which is your money that you make after you've done all your deductions for your taxes, and then
Mhm.
you subtract 150% of the poverty line. That's what you're going to pay every month on the new IBR plan. You have access to that, and you will get forgiveness after 20 years
Mhm.
of making payments. And the forgiveness, I put that in quotes because you're going to get taxed on it. So
Yeah.
you get taxed as income. So when you get your loans forgiven in 20 years, your actual income that you will be shown on your tax statement is probably over like multiple six figures. So you're gonna
Yeah.
have to pay tax on that. But if you plan for it effectively, you can still be really successful. Anyway, so that's what would happen if you're somebody who just graduated. That's kind of your option. Now, you can do public service loan forgiveness, which is 10 years of working for a not-for-profit, and you can get your loans forgiven after 10 years tax-free, which is something that a lot of my friends are doing as well. Or you can go on to the standard repayment plan, which is go gung ho and pay off your debt as fast as you can, which I know a lot of travel PTs and people who make high incomes do.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll get into how to repay after I go through the options. But so you can, that's what you have right now. If you're someone who just graduated, you have options like that are still current to all the current borrowers.
Mhm.
Here's where the gray area is. If you're somebody who is like a first year student and you joined your program like this past year and you're going to take out loans after July of 2026, but you already started your program, you can actually still take out graduate plus loans, which are actually going to be eliminated after July 2026 for anybody who's brand new. But if you're already in a PT program, you don't need to worry about grad plus loans getting eliminated or anything. You're still going to be able to basically borrow the same way you've been borrowing up until the time that you graduate. So you're kind of like pseudo exempt in that like you can still take out grad plus loans until like I think the 2028 or 2029
Oh,
school year. All this information is like in the bill that was signed and stuff like that. So if you
yeah.
really want to dig deep, you can.
Yeah.
But basically, you can still take out grad plus if you're in that like you've already started school, but you're not graduating until after 2026. So that's kind of your mid area. If you're
Yeah.
going to be a new student, let's say like after July of 2026, let's say you start in the fall of 2026, your program, and you start taking out loans, you are going to have a lot more restrictions. So you basically, your lifetime loan limit is $257,000. That's as much as you can take out for your lifetime, including your undergrad, including PT school. If you're in PT school, you can take out up to $50,000 a year in your student loans.
Mm.
You're capped at $200,000 a lifetime in PT school. So
Oh,
here's where the math doesn't add up, right?
yeah.
If your PT school is only 3 years long and you're capped at $200,000, you're actually only able to actually take out $150,000 because most programs are 3 years long. So
Yeah.
that $200,000 cap is for professional schools and doctorate programs, including law school, dental school, PA school, that sort of thing. So those programs actually cost a lot more than PT school does sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's where they'll hit that 200,000 cap a lot differently than we would. So for most people who are in PT school, if your program is 3 years and you can only take out 50K a year in loans, you're capped at basically $150,000 for your PT school, which happens to be the average at which most PTs that are graduating now tend to have in student loan debt. So it's
Yeah.
pretty interesting how that all works in terms of like where people are taking out loans now versus what it might be in the future with these caps.
Yeah.
So you're going to be capped in that way if you're a new student.
Yeah.
What else? Oh yeah. So if you're a new student or if you're in that gray area that I was talking about earlier, I was talking about repayment options and the income-based repayment and all that. You will not have access to that. You will only have access to something called the repayment assistance plan, which is something that's coming in the new bill starting next year. And the difference is that it's based on your adjusted gross income, not your discretionary income. So the difference is just whatever you deduct from your taxes And then you have that total line balance of, okay, this is how much I brought in this year. That's how much they're calculating your payment off of. And the
Okay.
other big thing is that your repayment period will be over 30 years instead of 20.
Oh,
So if you're going to be working in the private sector as a PT and you're graduating after 2026 with your student loans, you need to think about, okay, am I going to aggressively pay down this debt or am I going to be holding on to this for the next 30 years? The the good news is that you do get like interest subsidies, so your loan balance will actually not balloon over time. It'll actually decrease with this plan. So there are some good things about it.
yeah.
But in general, it's generally a worse version of the Biden administration's SAVE plan, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that. You'll only have access to that when you graduate if you're in the gray area or a new student.
Yeah.
Um, and then there was something else I was going to say about repayment assistance. Oh, right. It's still eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So if you do the 10 years, it works the same way as it does for the people who are graduated now. So if you do work in a hospital, you'll still get forgiveness tax-free after 10 years.
Yeah.
And if you're doing like travel and you want to pay it off aggressively, there is like a new standard repayment plan. But if
Mhm.
you're paying off aggressively, it won't matter to you because you're just going gung-ho at your debt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a lot, but hopefully that outlines a good amount of the options that's there. I actually have resources on this on my Instagram page. So if you like want to get into the nitty-gritty, I have a complete guide for this on student loans and also your repayment options on my Instagram. So you can check those out if you really want to dive in and get some clarity on your options.
Awesome. And I can tag that too in the description too. So I think that'd be very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know there's like different options now to repay the loans, and I like that you had kind of mentioned it before with aggressively paying it off versus like not focusing on other things like investing and all the other stuff. Is there, in your opinion, like, is there a certain amount of debt where it's almost better to focus on other things? So, say maybe you go to a private school, is there like a certain number where it's almost like a point of diminishing return where you should focus on other things, or just kind of what is your like strategy with that?
Yeah. So that's a really good question, actually, because everybody's situation is a little bit different. But I will give you kind of a solid answer, which is that if it's not necessarily a specific number in terms of balance, it's more your debt to income ratio that I care about. So if you're a physical therapist who is about to come out of school and you take your lowball offer of $75,000 from your first job, first
Yeah.
of all, I think you made a mistake. But second of all, if your debt is at 150,000, guess what? You've got two times the amount of debt that you have to your income.
Right.
So, general rule of thumb, if you have over 1.5 times your debt to income ratio, meaning your debt is over 1.5 times the amount that your income is, I would highly consider doing prioritizing not being aggressive, prioritizing going through your federal program, taking advantage of that, leveraging your student debt through the federal program, building wealth and then paying off your loans over the course of the 20 years or the 30 years if you're in the private sector, or doing public service loan forgiveness. So doing that too, after just 10 years, you get them forgiven. So
Yeah.
that's another factor is public service loan forgiveness, which we can get into if you want. But in general, 1.5 times your debt to income ratio is a good number to kind of stick with. So just for funsies, I made a case study just so that
Okay.
we could go over. So
Yeah.
we've got on one hand, so let's like imagine this. We've got two students, right?
Yeah.
One student, investing Ivan, he makes $100,000 of his adjusted gross income,
Hmm.
and he's got 3,000 bucks a month that he can put towards student loans or investing, whichever he chooses.
Hmm.
And we've also got debt-free Dave, who
Yeah.
also makes $100,000 after graduating school.
Yeah.
And he also has $3,000 a month to put towards the student loans or investing. So same amount of money. His both of their student loan balances are $150,000 and they're at 6% interest rate, which is pretty average for what the interest rates are right now.
Yeah.
So their debt to income ratio is 1.5, right? So they make 100,000 in terms of their adjusted gross income and their loans are 150,000, which is 1.5 times that amount. So investing Ivan, he starts off by just making the monthly payments on his IBR plan over 20 years, and
Mhm.
anything that's left over, he puts towards his taxable brokerage account in an investment that brings him 8% back every year. Now,
Mhm.
this is super generalized returns and everything like that, but we're just going through it for
Yeah.
the case.
Yeah.
Debt-free Dave, he decides to pay off all of his debt as quickly as he can. He's going debt crusader, like he's gung-ho. He pays all $3,000 a month towards his student loan balance over the course of those 20 years. I think he becomes debt-free way before 20 years.
Yeah.
But he doesn't invest, right? So he doesn't have any of that built up compounding interest.
Right.
So guess who comes out on top? Investing Ivan comes out with a portfolio of over $1.3 million by the
Mhm.
time 20 years comes around in
Wow.
his taxable brokerage account. And
Yeah.
that is after paying his tax bomb. When he gets his loans forgiven and you get taxed on it,
Yeah.
like that's a big amount of money. That's after he pays that.
Yeah.
In
Wow.
Debt-Free Dave, he ends up with just over $1 million after 20 years. So
Mm.
he got debt-free before investing Ivan, and he started investing all his 3,000 in the years leading up to 20. But he actually ended up with over $300,000 less than investing Ivan did. Now,
Wow.
that's
That,
at the 1.5 debt to income ratio mark. So, if
yeah.
you have a really big income shovel, like if you are a travel PT and your spouse or something is a travel PT and you both
Yeah.
combine your incomes or something and go crazy on your debt and you can do that, then
Yeah.
that might be a good idea. But if you're somebody who's working in the private sector or somebody who's working for a not-for-profit, and you're making a way lower income than your debt is, it might be better to think about investing because the amount of money that you can build and compound over time, by the time you actually get your loans forgiven, you'll actually end up actually pretty wealthy compared to somebody who did not invest at all and spent their time paying down their loans to the government, but they didn't build anything up for themselves. So then
Yeah.
they're left being debt free and going, woohoo, I'm debt free. But then
Yeah.
they're like, wait, what do I do now? I got nothing.
Yeah.
So making sure that you know that the power of time on your side, especially with your debt. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a good case study to give you an idea of like, oh wow, shoot, like when I went through something like that on my own and I found out, okay, wait a minute. So student loans, you can actually still build wealth while having student loans and making your minimum payments. It is possible. You just have to have the right plan.
Yeah. I love that you had mentioned too that it's more about like the time component because I feel like at least when I started school and even going through it, I thought debt free was the goal, but now I'm having other goals in mind too. So I love that you had shared that.
Yeah, yeah, and I know people who are, like that want to say, I'm going to be debt free, and if that's the right plan for you, then absolutely go for it, right? But as
Yeah.
you said, other goals come up, life comes up, and stuff,
Yeah.
and there's a certain balance to be had, like I was talking about earlier when it came to being a student, right? Like when we're young, like this stuff, this time, we don't get back. We don't get any of our minutes back. And
Yeah.
there are people who will, tell you that, you took out the debt. So you got to work really hard to pay back as fast as you can.
Yeah.
When there are these government programs that you can literally leverage to help cover your student debt and
Yeah.
have a plan, while also living for today and giving yourself success in tomorrow.
Yeah. Like you're in a lot of debt overall. I think it's great to make it more sustainable in that way. So I love you had mentioned that.
Yeah, and sometimes that is true for students who took out undergrad debt and they also took out PT school debt. So some of them, some
Right.
some people that I know are in over $200,000 of debt,
Yeah.
and it's not something that's completely impossible. It's actually not that uncommon at all,
Yeah.
uh, and that's okay. You can still be successful and still build wealth even with that amount of student debt.
Yeah. And that's great to hear. I hope that encourages some people because you can't always control like which PT school you get into. So
Yeah.
you can really only make the most of the situation you have.
Exactly. And I know I saw a little bit about your story, and I thought that was really inspiring about how your journey going from, getting into PT school and getting through your classes and stuff, and then
Yeah.
stuff happened, right? And then you
Yeah.
had to get back into PT school, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a super cool story and like super motivating for anybody who's out there who's like, can I do it? And
Yeah.
your case is like something that should be like super motivating for those people.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. I
congrats to
appreciate
you
it.
on that. That's an amazing story.
Thank you. So for all the students that passed their boards exam, they're on the job hunt now. You had done a really great post on this in one of your previous posts. Is what considerations do you take into account when you're looking for a job that go beyond the salary?
Yeah. So if you're not planning on doing like specific travel contracts or you want to go work in the private sector and you're looking for your first job. So like when I went through looking my first job, I was pretty well educated on what things to look for in a contract. Because there's more to it than just your salary. A lot of companies will lowball you with a very low salary, which is a problem on its own. But there's a
Mhm.
lot more things that you can negotiate, which are they're called non-monetary items, which basically means things that are not directly related to your salary on the contract. So some of these things include paid time off, which I actually just made a post on today about that. Student loan reimbursement, so your tuition reimbursement, your continuing education budget, your employer match for your retirement plans. So if you are getting a retirement plan through your work and they do some kind of a match, you can actually negotiate that match. It's not necessarily something that's always set in stone with a lot of companies. Uh, so those are just some of the things. So for example, if you're like, you might argue that like paid time off is, well, it doesn't really show up in my paycheck. It actually does because when you take off time, so for example, if you get 2 weeks, most of the time it's 2 weeks off. I get 2 weeks off right now. I'm in my first year as a clinician. That was my base package. I'm going to be negotiating for more when I get through my 1 year. That's something I'm going to be prioritizing with my boss
Yeah.
is to add another week of pay time off because when you have more freedom to travel and do those things and you do it while getting paid, you're actually making money. You're getting that money back when in reality those could have been unpaid days.
Right.
Or days that you just wouldn't be able to take that vacation, or days that you wouldn't be able to go see your family.
Yeah.
So that actually does have a monetary value attached to it. It's just not something that you see in your paycheck. And I encourage people to think about it that way because especially if you're not going to do travel PT, like travel PT has its own set of freedom and stuff like that that you could do with travel. But when you're working for, a corporation or a small business like I am, where, I'm in the clinic 5 days a week full time, and I still love what I do, but I definitely value that paid time off. And so when I get to go on vacations like I just did, and I know I'm getting paid to be doing that. Like I'm not losing any money by doing that.
Yeah.
It's actually worth something to me because it's time that I can spend doing the things that I love and the things that I value
Right.
outside of the clinic. So that's paid time off, and I would encourage people to think about it that way.
Yeah.
When it comes to student loan reimbursement, if you like in my package that I negotiated with my boss for my first year, I'm getting $5,000 a year towards repaying student loans over the course of 4 years, which can be negotiated even further beyond that. So if I stay with the company for 4 years, which I plan on doing right now. But anyway, if you can get student loan reimbursement, you're actually like if let's say your base pay is like 75 grand, which is again something you shouldn't take. But if you're 75 grand and you get $5,000 in student loan reimbursement, um, and I guess I say that because I live in the Northeast. So 75 grand might be worth a lot more somewhere else in the country. I'll caveat with that.
Yeah.
Um, but if you get $5,000 towards your student loans, you're actually making 80, and half of it, a lot of it is going towards your student loans. Now, the way I have it with my boss is I actually have it where I'm getting that payment in a lump sum, and all I have to do is show that I'm making payments towards my student loan. So he's making my monthly payment for me. So I
Oh,
don't have to budget my student loan payment at all.
yeah.
And especially for your first year out of school, when you make not as much money because you don't have a full year
Yeah.
under your belt, a monthly payment is actually pretty low. So
Yeah.
your tuition reimbursement will cover that and more. So that's not coming out of your pocket at all.
That is,
So you can actually negotiate that because for your boss, it's actually tax deductible. So he has an incentive to give you more student loan reimbursement if you can negotiate it. So again, and outside the base salary, it's got a monetary value, and you should take advantage of it if you can.
yeah.
CEU budget, like we all love continuing education.
Hmm.
Uh, I have taken some continuing education courses, and the CEU budget is something that you can use to further your education and become a better clinician, which hopefully we all are striving to do.
Hmm.
And we were talking about the whole age of social media, like, oh my gosh, there are so many PTs out there who are running amazing courses. Our professors talk to us about getting mentorship from somebody in a clinic and from one
Yeah.
person. What are we doing? We've got
Right.
so many mentors out there who are teaching all
Truly.
these amazing things.
Yeah.
And you can use your CEU budget to go take their course, to go learn what they're teaching,
Yeah.
and apply it directly to the clinic. And that's got a monetary value because if you bring back stuff to your clinic that's of value from your CEU budget, guess
Yeah.
what? Your boss and whoever you're working for is going to see that, and you're going to
Yeah.
be able to use that as leverage in your next negotiation to get even higher pay. So if
Yeah.
you're getting results that your boss or your other therapists are not getting, guess what? You've got a huge reason to get more income. So
Right.
indirectly, you're going to be increasing your income by getting more educated and getting results for your patients that maybe otherwise other people aren't getting.
Yeah.
So again, thinking about, okay, how can I maximize my income potential? If they're not going to give you more in the base salary, see what you can get out of your CEU budget,
Yeah.
because that, again, is a direct tool to increase your income.
Yeah.
And then I also said employer match. So that's your like 401k. If you have a simple IRA through your business, sometimes what they'll do is they'll match your contributions up to a certain percentage, and that can be negotiated. So like sometimes they offer like a 3% match, and if you're like, oh, I actually want like if you're not giving me more salary, maybe make it a 5%, 6% match.
Yeah.
Or instead of making it 50 cents on the dollar, make it a dollar for dollar match, right? These
Yeah.
things can be negotiated sometimes, they're not always set in stone.
Yeah.
That one's a little less common, but if you can negotiate that, I would. Just
Yeah.
those are all just the non-monetary things that you can negotiate. And there's like a post like you mentioned that I made that kind of breaks that down a little bit, but I actually broke it down a lot further right now than I did on that
Oh,
post.
that was very thorough, and I think that really brings attention to other things like that are going to affect your quality of life and to your income too, that you don't really think about at first, but really make a difference down the road.
Absolutely. It's yeah, these things are super underrated when people just look at like that big number on the contract. Here's what you're gonna make in the salary. Wow, right? But like that's cool and all, but like all these other little things, these perks, they increase what's called the total contract value, which is what your actual contract is worth. And it can actually be worth a lot more depending on the actions that you take with the money that you've been given in those non-monetary items.
Right. And this might honestly be taboo, but I don't care. I'm going to say it. Like, you can take on like a very high, it really depends on your situation, like who you are and how you can tolerate it. But like in some positions too, I wonder how like taking a higher paying contract and then getting burned out in 6 months and wanting to leave the field, like the trade-off with the opportunity cost of taking that versus taking into account all the other things that you had mentioned too.
Yeah, I totally agree, honestly. It's like that mindset of like, okay, yes, you could work for a mill and make like bonuses for every like extra patient you see. Like I had a offer from a mill clinic where they were like offering me a decently high base salary, but again, another big factor is how much you're actually making per patient that you see.
Yeah.
So that's another factor, but like you get bonuses for seeing extra patients. Basically, you're getting paid to burn yourself out.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like that after like 6 months of being in that clinic, I'd be like, I'm done. I don't want to
Yeah.
do this anymore. Like it's just you lose the fire and the passion, and you want to be able to maintain that throughout your career.
Yeah.
Especially if you love PT as much as I do, especially going into the field, right?
Yeah.
So that's a huge factor in terms of like, okay, am I just gonna burn myself out, or am I gonna actually get a contract that will actually increase my value as a clinician to make me more money rather than be focused on what the number is at the top of the contract when you first accept your offer.
Right. And there are ways like other people can do it too. Like we're not saying knocking down meals either. I think it's just interesting to see like all the different options you have because you truly do have options. Like you're not stuck in one place and there's a ways around it too.
Yes, exactly. Like you can be successful working for a mill. I
Mm.
personally wouldn't do it. But if you're a student who's like my first job, I'm going to take a job at a mill, like there's something to be said today
Yeah.
about the lack of job loyalty and that it
Yeah.
can actually get you paid more.
Yeah.
Job hopping, especially if you're job hopping between private clinics, you can actually get way more substantial raises by job hopping than you could by staying loyal to a company. And that's
Right.
the unfortunate reality that we have today.
Yeah.
It's not a knock on any boss that you work for or anything like that. But if you go from making a certain salary at this clinic and then you leave and say to the next person, hey, I've got this experience and this skill set, they'll
Right.
pay you more than your
Right.
other boss would because they've got budget restrictions and other things that they need to work with. Like
Yeah.
there's a plenty amount of jobs out there for physical therapists, and it's a very hot field that will not be replaced by AI. So there are
Right.
always going to be opportunities out there for you to make money
Yeah.
and it's on you to go and get it. And loyalty, unfortunately, is not one of those things that can get you there. I
Right.
hope my goal is to be loyal to the company that I'm at right now because there's a clear succession plan in place.
Yeah.
However, if it doesn't work out that way, I'm okay to job hop too. Like
Yeah.
this is just how the field is right now. And if you want to maximize your income, that's something to consider. Even though people say,
Yeah.
"Oh, you got to be loyal, you got to stick with your company." That's not the way people are making money right now.
Right. And I'm glad that you said that too, because that's just the reality of it.
And, people will pressure you obviously because your bosses want you to stay with them so that they don't have to go out and hire another therapist that doesn't know their systems.
Right.
But it's just one of those things. Like you need to, if you want to staying with your company, you need to
Yeah.
make your boss aware of what they're gonna lose if they
Of your
lose and you
value.
don't pay you more, right? Not what you're
Exactly.
gonna lose by moving. There are always gonna be more jobs out there to take. It's a matter
Exactly.
of what your boss is about to lose.
Right. Yeah. That's a really good point. For all the people that graduated too, I found this too because I'm about 6 months out, you're about a year out.
Yeah.
What is some like advice you would have on lifestyle creep? Because as a student, you go from making $0 to
Oh,
making all of this like overnight, almost all this, not a lot of money, just depending on like what you're making, but you make a lot more than you made as a student. And I found too, especially with travel therapy, lifestyle creep can sometimes come into play. Do you have any advice for navigating that?
yeah. So this was actually my first ever like post that I made on my Instagram. I sat in my car and I faced the camera and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna talk and hope something comes of this when I was first getting like used to getting on camera on Instagram. And that
Yeah.
was like one of the what I didn't realize it at the time, but I was basically talking about lifestyle creep, which is
Mhm.
the point that you just made, which is that you go from taking out loans every semester and having almost no income if you don't have like a side job or something.
Yeah.
That was the position I was in. And then you go to making all of a sudden, that's again the trap that people fall into with the lowball offers because they were making no money before. So when they
Mhm.
see 75 grand or whatever their lowball offer is, they go, wow, that's amazing. That's so much money, which it
Yeah.
is. It is a lot of money because you're going from 0 to 100 basically.
Yeah.
So here's my advice to those people who are like, oh, okay, so I'm about to make a lot of money. I'm gonna go and increase my lifestyle all of a sudden. Try and live as best you can like you were in school. So
Mhm.
for example, if obviously if you're going to be moving out, you're going to be having to pay for some kind of housing. Now, if you lived in school for housing, great. You can kind of have a similar congruence there with that. But
Mhm.
live as much as you can like you did during school in terms of the food you bought, the lifestyle that you lived. Like
Mhm.
you're not gonna like I don't advise people to all of a sudden be going and buying a brand new car, going on these crazy expensive vacations,
Yeah.
right? These things that you were not able to pay for before, but you could now because you're making a lot more money.
Yeah.
However, that money should be used to build wealth and future success, but also, we want to have money to live for today. But
Right.
there's a you need to ground yourself in the idea that, okay, wait, I'm making this money, but if I live like I did like in school, all of a
Mhm.
sudden you're gonna have this huge gap. And the gap is the difference between your expenses and your income. And the
Mhm.
wider your gap, the more success that you can build. So if you
Right.
can have any opportunity to say, okay, wait, I'm out of school, I'm graduated, or maybe you can still live with your parents for like a year or two or something, or
Yeah.
you have those opportunities to save money where you can to say, you know what, I'm gonna get my financial foundation set up while I'm just out of school and making a whole lot of money, and
Mhm.
say, okay, I'm gonna get my financial foundation set up, or I'm gonna go crazy on my loans because I'm living at home still, not having to pay rent or anything like that. Um, if you have those kinds of opportunities, I would take them
Yeah.
because these are the years that you can use to really build yourself a foundation that could either set you up for success, or if you go the lifestyle creep route, somewhere that you won't be able to turn back from. Because once
Right.
you start increasing your lifestyle, it's very hard to go back. You
Yeah.
will not be able to say, "Oh, I'm going to go live in the cushy apartment condo complex," and then say, "Oh, shoot, I need to actually get a hold of my financial situation and downgrade everything." It's a lot easier to start where you were than to back down from something you upgraded from.
Right. Basically start humble and then you can always like you're not depriving yourself either. Just kind of start humble and then build on that from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like again, if you're balancing the right way, right? If you're thinking about it the right way while you're in school, you're still living life, right? While you're studying, you should be hopefully doing some experiences with your friends. You want to continue that outside of school, maybe do a little bit more because you're making more money, right?
Yeah.
But as long as you're meeting the goals that you have set, you need to have some kind of a financial plan, right? You don't want to just go, all right, well, I guess I'm going to spend all this money because I just made it. If you
Yeah.
have a plan, if you're meeting your investment goals, if you're meeting the goals that you want to meet to reach whatever goal you have, whether that's financial freedom, buying a house, whatever goals that you might have in life, being debt free, right?
Mhm.
If you can meet those goals, but then also have space to be able to pay for the other things that you value in life, that's what matters, right? So instead of having no plan, what's the saying, right? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah.
That's what basically it is, and that's
Yeah.
how lifestyle creep gets people.
Yeah. This has been so helpful. Thank you, Noah, so much for your expertise. If people want to connect with you and ask you questions, what's the best place to find you at?
So right now, the best place is on Instagram. I need to expand. So you can DM me at any time
Yeah.
at personalfinance.pt or just search up like PFPT. You might find me that way.
Yeah.
And you can always DM me. I am an open book when it comes to questions about personal finance. If you want help creating some kind of a financial plan, if you want me to take a look and work with you on your finances, I am happy to do that as well. We can get on a call together and discuss. Just again, DM me any questions that you have. I want to get this message out there to more people so that way more people can be very financially educated. And the people that think that they want to be debt free can be debt free if they want. And the people that want to go a different route and still be successful, they can do that too. So I'm trying to open up everybody's options. But right now, Instagram is the best place. So you can find me there.
Thank you so much for all of your expertise, and thanks everyone for tuning in.